Chapter 8, Roommates. In mid-October, Dr. Beavis told me, "I have wonderful news. You're being discharged from University Hospital and going back to the Sheltering Arms for rehabilitation." I burst into tears. "That isn't wonderful. I don't want to leave. I want to stay here." Dr. Beavis patted my shoulder. "We've done all we can for you here," he said. "You need different therapy now. You'll have a new doctor, and I don't want a new doctor. I want you to be my doctor." "And a new physical therapist." Tommy said, "No more Mrs. Crab." I blew my nose. "Do I have to?" I asked. "Can I be rehabilitated here?" "We don't do it here. We only handle acute cases." "Tommy's been here longer than I have, and you aren't kicking him out," I said. "Well, Tommy still needs a respirator." "I don't know anybody at the Sheltering Arms." "You didn't know anyone here when you first came. It's always hard to be the new kid, but you're going to adjust." I saw that there was no use arguing. "When do I leave?" I asked. "This afternoon. The discharge papers are all ready. Actually, they were ready a couple of days ago, but the Sheltering Arms didn't have a bed for you until now." "You've known for 2 days that I was leaving? Why didn't anyone tell me?" "Maybe we were afraid you'd make a fuss." I scowled at him, aware that I was making a fuss. "They probably won't even paint my toenails," I said. He laughed and went out the door. This time I could take my belongings with me. My clothes, books, and the new teddy bear were packed into a paper bag. All morning, nurses stopped by to wish me well. Even Miss Crab came by to say goodbye. "I know you hated the exercises because they hurt," she said, "but someday you'll thank me for doing them." I doubted it. "I'll miss you," Tommy said, "especially your reading to me and your knock-knock jokes, and I'm going to miss the Lone Ranger." "You can keep my radio," I told him. "Think about me every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday." "No kidding, I get to keep the radio?" "Sure. My parents can bring me a radio from my home." That wasn't true. I didn't have my own radio at home. I listened to the Lone Ranger on our family radio. But in the time we had been together, no one had visited Tommy, for his family lived hundreds of miles away. They probably didn't know that he wanted a radio at the hospital. I decided Tommy needed to hear the Lone Ranger more than I did. "Thanks," he said. "I hope you learn to walk again." I looked at his small head protruding from the iron lung. The soft swoosh, swoosh of the machine had been background music for our reading, for every conversation, and for the Lone Ranger broadcasts. Now I was being released, while my fellow inmate in the prison of paralysis might listen to the swooshing forever. "I hope you learn to breathe without the respirator," I told him, and I had never made a more sincere wish. "Goodbye, Tonto." "Adios, Kemo-sabe." As I was being transferred to the ambulance gurney, Dr. Beavis pinned a yellow rose to my pajama top. "For my favorite patient," he said. My lip began to tremble. He said, "Knock, knock." I blinked back my tears. "Who's there?" "You'll." "You'll who?" "You'll be back soon, to walk for me." "That's right," I said, as I lifted into the ambulance. At the Sheltering Arms, I was put into a large room with 4 other girls. Instead of the sterile white walls and white blankets that I had at the university hospital, room 202 was filled with color, striped blankets, flower curtains, pictures on the wall. There was even a bookcase filled with books. We each had a hospital bed that could be cranked up so that our heads and shoulders were elevated. This allowed us to see each other, and I quickly became acquainted with my new roommates. Dorothy was 14, a cheerful girl with a shy, sweet smile. She was sitting in a wheelchair when I arrived, and she waved a welcome. I liked her immediately. "I came here from University Hospital too," she said, "on my birthday. I was still paralyzed then from the neck down." Dorothy told me she had been at the Sheltering Arms for 2 months and was hoping to learn how to walk with braces on her legs. Shirley, who was also 14, was fighting a double problem. She was born with arms that was only straightened halfway. Now polio made the situation even worse. After 7 months in the hospital, she still has no movement in her legs. Because of back weakness, she could sit in a wheelchair for only brief periods. She also had breathing problems. Renee, petite and dark-haired, was 12 like me. "I'm learning to walk with leg braces and walking sticks," she told me. "I'll probably always have to use them. That is, unless physical therapy works wonders." At the mention of physical therapy, I groaned. "Ugh, I call physical therapy torture time," I said. "It isn't so bad," Renee said. "At least I'm out of the iron lung." "You were in an iron lung?" I said. Renee nodded. "At University Hospital. I was in one for 5 months. I was in an iron lung too, said Shirley. So was I, said Dorothy. My hopes for Tommy soared. Maybe he would get out of the iron lung. I looked at the last of my roommates, who was also in a wheelchair. She didn't say anything. This is Alice, Dorothy said. She's 13. Alice was a sturdy-looking girl with wide eyes and soft curls. Her toes pointed permanently downward, the drop foot condition that the footboard on my hospital bed was intended to prevent. I asked her how long she was at Sheltering Arms. 10 years, she said. I gaped. 10 years? You've been here since you were 3? Well, well, Alice said. The genius can subtract. When will you be able to go home, I asked. I am home. Alice lives at Sheltering Arms, Renee said. Disbelieving, I pressed on. But what about your parents? Don't you have a family? My parents, said Alice, don't want me. I stared at her. I had no idea what to say. After I'd been here for a few months, the doctor said I could go home, but I would never get any better, Alice said. I waited. My parents refused to take me. They didn't want a big old crippled up blob on their hands for the rest of their lives. I realized she wanted to shock me, and she succeeded. I was totally speechless. Renee continued the explanation. Alice comes from a big family, she said. She got polio before the doctors knew about hot packs and muscle stretches. When she didn't get well, her parents were unable to take care of her and all the other kids too, so she became a ward of the state. I'm so sorry, I said. Don't feel sorry for me, Alice snapped. I like it here. I wouldn't leave if they paid me. I thought about my own parents. I knew they would never refuse to take me home, no matter what condition I was in. For the first time since my paralysis set in, I realized there was something worse than having polio. Don't look so horrified, Alice said. Dorothy could go home too if there was anybody to take care of her. I looked nervously across the room. Had another of my roommates been abandoned by her family? Dorothy smiled reassuringly. I live on a farm, she said, and everyone has to work. I can't go home until I get around for myself because once I'm home, there won't always be someone to help me. My family can't afford to hire anybody. I'm learning to put on braces on my legs now, so it shouldn't be too much longer. You hope, said Alice. The chip on her shoulder seemed to be the size of a fireplace log. But I didn't blame her for being mad at the world. I had never thought of myself as a privileged child. My dad sold meat for a Hormel company. My mother was a homemaker. Grandpa worked in a print shop. Ours was an average middle-class life. Now I saw how lucky I was. Not only to have parents who loved me, but parents who were able to care for me and meet my needs, whatever they might be. I had absolutely no doubt that if the doctor said I could go home, I'd be out the door the next day. And if I ended up a big old crippled up blob, as Alice put it, I shuddered. Even though I knew my parents would always love me and take care of me, I didn't want them to have to. I wanted to go home and return to school and be a normal person. I wanted to go back to University Hospital. I wanted to walk for Dr. Beavis. I was going to meet my new physical therapist, Miss Ballard, the next morning, and I dreaded it. What if she was another Miss Crabbe? What if she was worse? After hearing Alice's story, I decided I would do everything Miss Ballard asked me to do, even if she was the torture champion of all time. All right, that's the end of chapter 8. So what happened in this book? A lot of details packed into this chapter. What sort of thoughts do you have? And what sort of feelings do you have?